Now let's dive deep into this big LGBTQ story for today. I'm Jeff Oliverio, and let's queer up trans rights. California defies Trump ban on trans athletes in schools. In a bold stand for trans rights, California officials are refusing to comply with an order from Donald Trump's administration to bar transgender athletes from K-12 school sports. On June 27th, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon gave the state 10 days to sign a resolution agreement demanding an end to trans-inclusive sports policies, and even called for personalized apologies to cisgender athletes who lost to transgender competitors. But California's response is a firm no. Len Garfinkle, general counsel for the California Department of Education, wrote that, quote, "The California Department of Education respectfully disagrees with OCR's analysis, and it will not sign the proposed resolution agreement," end quote. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom's office went further, calling the document a political move without legal force. Newsom's communication director, Izzy Gardon, added that McMahon was confusing government with her WrestleMania days, dramatic, fake, and completely divorced from reality. McMahon did not mince words either, firing back on Twitter, writing, quote, "California has just rejected our resolution agreement to follow federal law and keep men out of women's sports. Turns out, Governor Newsom's acknowledgement that it's an issue of fairness was empty political grandstanding," adding that he would be hearing from the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Shannon Minter of the National Center for LGBTQ Rights said, quote, "This administration is targeting California in an attempt to intimidate it into backing away from its strong anti-discrimination laws. I'm encouraged to see the California Department of Education is standing up to that," end quote. For now, California's message is clear. Trans kids belong on the field, on the court, and in the fight for fairness. You know, the thing that's really frustrating about these stories is I feel like it's a trap, because it's forcing our community to constantly be out in front, of course, defending the trans community, which we should, of course, but it's also making the entire focus of things to take away from all of the other really terrible things that are happening. Like, again, trans people in sports is such a I won't even say narrow, is the slimmest of issues across the country, where healthcare for trans people is so much more important.
Healthcare for everybody.
Healthcare for everyone, for, cutting and so it's just like they keep setting these traps that of course we have to keep defending. And I keep thinking, what are the traps that we can set so that we can catch them having to come out to they have such easy targets on the trans community, the immigrant community, they set up these traps, and then, as topics for people that are not connected to the communities, or not connected to these immigrants, or to trans people, or LGBTQ people, or Black people, whatever the organization is that they're coming out against, that they're on the sideline saying, well, oh, why does that matter? Why is Gavin Newsom focusing on that? And he's not focusing on that, but it's a trap that they keep setting up, and it keeps recycling itself. And we do a story like this probably every single time I'm here.
Right. I have a caveat to that, because in high school I was a student athlete, and my feeling is that if a boy reaches puberty, then there should and then transition, there should be a waiting period. Because once a young man hits puberty, there are changes in his body. And if a 10th grader at the end of the school year realizes that they are trans and goes through the changes, 3 months or 4 months later in the next school year, I don't think it's appropriate for that person, that newly identified trans person, to compete against women. That is completely off if you have someone like Jazz Jennings transition before puberty.
Yeah.
So, and when you're talking about college athletes, I still believe in the time. Like, if you transition, you can't go next week and compete against females. I think there should be a time period. But I believe once that time period is done, they should absolutely be able to compete.
These are questions that can be answered by endocrinologists and pediatricians and psychiatrists, and those people are involved. These attacks on trans people are not taking medical questions and timing. That's not what they're about. It's just about attacking the other.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes it. Of course, you have to do things appropriately and for your health and what's fair and blah, blah. But there are people involved in all of that. That's the way it's going to be. But McMahon, she doesn't care about any of that. This is just.
She knows about fairness in sports, though. She was the head of a sports organization.
But the head of a WrestleMania?
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and, well-known scholar, Mrs. McMahon, Mrs. WWE. But yeah, no, this is about cruelty and bigotry, and of course there's all kinds of nuances, but they're not nuancing, they're just attacking.
Right.
The kind of like story here of transitioning that is so often in like this kind of playbook has you see more sophisticated understandings of transitioning in like an episode of Family Guy or something. You know what I mean? Like people like come out and they're like, oh, this transformation that happens overnight. Like this is exactly what you said. There are healthcare professionals, there are psychologists, who are with you, and therapists who are working with every part of this process to ensure that this is a safe and this is not like a decision that's made on a whim. And also the kind of clear indications, hormones play much less roles in like the way that we succeed in sports or in these kinds of. The thing that's most likely going to determine whether you're really good at sports is how rich your parents are. Like that's where the statistics are most clear. Like that is, if your parents got money to pay for good coaches, you're going to do well. Like that's usually the indicator.
And good, athletic diet, and yes, exactly.
I mean, it's interesting because when my son was playing basketball, I remember that I didn't know about this. I was not a student athlete. Shocker. In high school, I was in the choir also, Cindy. So it was interesting because there's a thing where you can like de-age your kids so that they're like, oh, they're competing as a 9th grader, but they're really 16. And this whole thing where you can like start them at a different age. So it's very similar if you think about it with genetics of like, puberty and all these other things.
It's called cheating.
Yes. Or if you're 6'2" and you're in the 7th grade, you could be playing on the varsity high school basketball team because your skill set is there. So again, there is a level to say, like, if you are a trans athlete and you have to go through some kind of qualifying round to see like where do you fit in the if you're a runner, are you at the level of somebody? What abilities are you at? Test people and put them in the category they belong. I mean, it's very simple.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be that complicated.
I also feel like we have to say this just because we're in Florida, but thank you to California for being the anti-Florida. Like that is like so much of it's such an important thing to say, like, because I want to see more people just saying no. Like this is absolutely like nuts, and like this is not. I don't give authority to things that are based on fallacies and
evil,
not factual and like ideological and like completely devoid of evidence. Like that's just not. There is no agreement here. We don't agree to things that are systemically wrong, right? Like and that's important to say.
And I think it's important to say, which we didn't talk about today with Linda McMahon being the Secretary of Education, that I think in Florida, it was on the Sun Sentinel today, they cut like $45 billion from like education funding for the state of Florida, and it's happening across the entire United States.
So they can give tax cuts.
That's not being talked about at all.
That's to your point that while 1% of the are being tormented.
Look over here.
1% of our kids are being tormented, and we have to respond to that. But that also does keep us from everyone else is getting hosed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that is a big LGBTQ story for today. There is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by subscribing and sharing Queer News Tonight.